She whispered for me to stay quiet, but her eyes begged me not to. The classroom felt different that evening. It wasn't the same place I had sat in years ago, scribbling notes, pretending to focus while secretly watching the way she carried herself at the front of the room. This time, there were no rows of restless students, no chatter or laughter spilling in through the open windows. Just silence. A silence so deep it made me aware of every small sound, the faint hum of the old fluorescent lights above, the occasional creak of wood as the building settled, the distant echo of footsteps in a hallway that already felt like it belonged to another world. She was there, sitting across the desk from me, her papers scattered in neat but purposeful stacks. Her handwriting, looping and elegant, trailed across the margins like quiet reminders of her discipline. A faint dust of chalk still lingered in the air, it clung to her dark blouse, catching the soft yellow light overhead, making her look almost unreal, as if time itself was reluctant to let her go. I remember shifting in my chair, not from discomfort, but because every moment near her made me too aware of myself, my hands, my breath, the way my heart seemed to thrum louder than the lights above us. She didn't speak at first. She simply looked down at her notes, flipping through them, but her silence wasn't cold. It was deliberate. Heavy. As if the air between us was already carrying more than words could hold. The late hour wrapped around us like a secret. Outside the windows, the sky had already gone dark, leaving only the faint reflection of our figures mirrored back at us. Inside, the smell of coffee lingered, warm and grounding, though untouched on her desk. The sharp edges of day had softened, replaced by something quieter, something fragile, something that whispered, "No one else will know what passes between these walls tonight." And then, she lifted her gaze. I'd forgotten how striking her eyes were. Not just beautiful, though they were, with that calm intensity that had always commanded attention, but layered, as if holding 100 thoughts at once. In the stillness, her glance carried weight. It lingered longer than it should have, just long enough to stir a question in me that I wasn't sure I wanted answered. The silence stretched, but it didn't suffocate. Instead, it pulled us closer, drawing invisible lines that made the room feel smaller, the desk between us more like a bridge than a boundary. I could hear her breathing, steady but deliberate, and I wondered if she, too, was listening to the rhythm of her own restraint. There was something unspoken here, something that had grown quietly in the shadows of time. And as I sat there, feeling the hush of the classroom wrap around us, I realized it wasn't the lesson I remembered anymore, it was her. Always her. And in that moment, even before the first word passed between us, I knew, this silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. She leaned forward, just slightly, enough for me to notice, enough for my pulse to betray me. Her perfume drifted across the narrow space between us, soft and almost accidental, a mix of jasmine and the faintest trace of coffee. It was the kind of scent that didn't announce itself, but lingered quietly, asking to be remembered. I found myself holding my breath, afraid that if I exhaled too loudly, I'd break the fragile moment balancing in the air. Her hand shifted, sliding across a stack of papers until her fingers brushed the edge, as though she needed something to ground herself. She didn't look at the papers, though. She looked at me. Straight into me. Her eyes were steady, but behind them I caught something else, a flicker of hesitation, like she was standing on a line she'd sworn never to cross. And then she spoke. The words barely existed, carried on the softest breath. "Stay quiet, someone might hear." It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a warning, not really. It was a confession. Her voice trembled at the edges, the kind of tremor that comes when someone is fighting against themselves. Every syllable drew me deeper into the weight of what she was trying to hold back. My body tensed, not in fear, but in recognition, as if her whisper wasn't just about the risk of being heard, but about the truth of what she felt. The room seemed to pause with her. Even the humming lights felt muted, like they too had leaned in to listen. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my chest, steady and heavy, as though it wanted to answer for me before I could. My throat tightened, but my eyes stayed locked on hers. She was older, wiser, the one who always carried herself with calm authority. Yet here, now, she was vulnerable. Not weak, never weak, but human in a way I'd never seen before. And in that vulnerability, I found myself caught between wanting to protect her from the fear in her voice and wanting to draw her closer into it. That whisper, that single breath of words, changed the air between us. It made the silence heavier, the closeness sharper, the possibility undeniable. And for the first time, I realized that what had always felt untouchable, was reaching out to touch me back. Her whisper hung between us, fragile and unfinished, like a secret that didn't want to be spoken too loudly. I should have let the silence cover it, should have nodded and looked away, but something inside me refused to let the moment pass. My voice rose before I even had time to second-guess it. Then bite my lip. The words left me in a quiet murmur, low enough that no one beyond these four walls could have heard, but sharp enough to cut through the weight of her restraint. I hadn't meant to sound so certain. I hadn't meant to sound like I was daring her. But the truth was, every part of me had been waiting for this moment, waiting for a chance to step beyond the invisible boundary that had always kept us apart. Her reaction was instant. A tiny intake of breath, sharp and delicate, caught at the back of her throat. Her posture stiffened, like the sound of my words had reached through her composure and pressed against her core. For the briefest second, her lips parted, not in speech but in shock, as if the reply had shaken something loose inside her. Our eyes held, refusing to break. Hers widened slightly, but not with anger. No. It was something else. A storm. A rush of disbelief, caution, and something more dangerous, something that looked achingly like desire. The desk between us no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a stage, an arena where neither of us wanted to admit the truth out loud. My pulse pounded, urging me forward, but I stayed rooted to my chair, afraid that one wrong move would shatter the fragile electricity holding us together. I could see her hands tremble, the faintest movement, but real. She tried to mask it by resting her fingers against the paper, but the effort only made it clearer. She was torn. Between rules and want. Between everything she should be and everything she secretly was in this moment. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. My words had already bridged the space. And as she sat there, lips parted, chest rising and falling with uneven breaths, I realized that for the first time. I wasn't the only one wrestling with what lived between us. For a long moment after my words, neither of us moved. The silence pressed in tighter, thick with something that no lesson, no rule, no boundary could quite contain. She lowered her gaze, as if the weight of looking at me was too much, but her hands betrayed her in ways her eyes could not. Her fingers shifted across the desk, slow and uncertain, grazing the corner of my notebook. At first it seemed accidental, a restless motion, like she was searching for something to hold on to. But the longer it lasted, the more deliberate it felt. Her knuckles brushed against mine, just the faintest contact, and the warmth of her skin pulsed through me like fire beneath my veins. I froze, not because I wanted her to stop, but because I was afraid that if I moved even slightly, the fragile spell would break. Her touch was soft, almost trembling, but it carried a charge that raced straight into my chest. My breath caught, sharp and unsteady, while my heartbeat thudded heavy against my ribs. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingertips lingered at the edge, as if testing how far she could go before the moment shattered. I felt her skin, smooth, warm, fragile in its hesitation, and yet beneath that hesitation was a strength, a need she couldn't quite hide. I wanted to close my hand over hers, to anchor her trembling fingers inside my grip, but I didn't. I let her guide the moment, let her decide if the line would stay unbroken. Her breathing shifted, slower now, but deeper, like every inhale carried the weight of choice. She glanced up, only for a second, and in her eyes I saw a storm of contradictions, fear of being caught, fear of being judged, and a longing that burned despite it all. The room seemed smaller with her touch lingering on mine. The shadows on the walls pressed closer, the hum of the lights fading into the background. All I could hear was the soft rhythm of her breath and the echo of my own pulse in my ears. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even a confession. But in that delicate brush of skin against skin, something passed between us, something more dangerous, more intimate than either of those things. And for the first time, I understood, sometimes the smallest touch can hold the loudest truth. Her words still echoed in my head, but now there was something louder, something wordless, pressing itself into the silence between us. She shifted in her seat, almost restless, as though her body was betraying thoughts she hadn't dared to say out loud. Her hand moved, sliding closer across the desk. At first, I thought she was reaching for the papers scattered near mine, a simple gesture, nothing more. But then her fingers brushed against the corner of my notebook. They lingered. Just long enough for me to notice. Just long enough to make me wonder if it was really an accident. I didn't breathe. Not properly. The lightest touch of her knuckles against mine sent a jolt through me, sharp and warm, like electricity sparking beneath the surface of my skin. I couldn't look away, couldn't think of anything else. Every nerve in my body seemed to converge on that single point of contact. Her touch trembled faintly, hesitant, almost questioning. She didn't pull away immediately, and in that pause I felt her conflict as clearly as if she had spoken it aloud. Her fingers hovered, brushing mine again, softer this time, deliberate. I wanted to reach for her hand, to lace my fingers through hers and remove all doubt, but something inside me held still. This wasn't a moment to take. It was a moment to be given. She drew a quiet breath, steadying herself, and I caught the smallest shiver in her exhale. Her perfume drifted closer, jasmine and something warmer, like skin after sunlight. The air between us grew heavier, charged with all the things we weren't saying. When her fingertips grazed the back of my hand, the touch was feather-light but unshakable. I felt it travel deeper than skin, into the space where restraint battled with want. My chest tightened, my pulse quickened, and I knew she felt it too, because when our eyes met, hers betrayed her. Vulnerability flickered there, caught between fear of consequence and a desire too strong to suppress. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. That fragile brush of skin against skin was louder than any whisper could be. And in that moment, I realized something simple yet undeniable. Sometimes the most dangerous closeness doesn't come from kisses or embraces, it comes from the trembling nearness of hands, from the silent promise that one small touch could change everything. Her fingers hovered near mine for a heartbeat too long before she finally drew them back, as though the sudden closeness had startled her. But it was already too late. That fleeting touch had carved itself into me, and I could see in her eyes that it had left its mark on her too. She shifted in her chair, spine straightening as though she needed to armor herself again. Her voice came low, almost broken, like she was trying to rebuild the distance with words alone. "This isn't right," she whispered, shaking her head faintly. "We can't, you know what it would mean." But her body didn't match her words. She leaned in unconsciously, her shoulder brushing mine as if pulled by gravity she couldn't resist. Her breath warmed the side of my face, uneven and telling. She could talk about rules and consequences all she wanted, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her, the way her chest rose and fell too quickly betrayed her, the way her eyes lingered on my lips betrayed her. I wanted to answer, but my throat tightened. I was afraid that if I spoke, the fragile truth balancing in the air would collapse. So I stayed still, letting her wrestle with the war inside her, watching as every second of silence deepened the cracks in her restraint. She pressed her palm flat against the desk, as though grounding herself, but it didn't steady her. Her hand shifted again, closer to mine, almost against her will. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, and in that pause, I saw it all, the part of her that wanted to walk away, and the part of her that wanted to let go completely. When she opened them again, there was no longer just fear. There was longing. A quiet, desperate kind of longing that made my chest ache. She spoke again, softer this time, but her words faltered. If anyone knew, her voice trailed off, unfinished, as if the thought itself was too heavy to complete. Her shoulder brushed against mine again, more firmly this time. I felt the warmth of her body so close, the rhythm of her breathing syncing with mine, the faintest shiver that passed through her as she stayed there, not moving away. And in that moment, I realized, it wasn't the rules holding her back. It was her heart, torn between protecting what she had built and surrendering to something she could no longer deny. The world outside the classroom faded until it no longer seemed to exist. No footsteps in the hallway. No voices down the corridor. Only us, two people caught in a silence that felt heavier than sound itself. She was so close now that I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin. Her shoulder pressed lightly against mine, a point of contact that pulsed like a secret heartbeat. I dared not move, afraid that if I shifted too quickly, she might remember herself and pull away. Her lips parted, as though she meant to speak. But no words came. Instead, she drew in a shallow breath, and that breath brushed against my cheek like the softest confession. I felt my own breathing falter, uneven, caught between anticipation and restraint. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down to my mouth, then back again. The look lasted no more than a second, but it said everything. It told me she wanted this. It told me she hated that she wanted it. It told me she was fighting a war she already knew she was losing. The space between us shrank without either of us deciding it. Her hair, loose at the sides, fell forward and grazed my face, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine and chalk dust. It was intoxicating, grounding and dizzying all at once. My pulse thundered, urging me to close the distance, to take what was right there waiting. But something in me held back. I didn't want to steal this moment, I wanted her to give it. I wanted her to choose. Her lips hovered inches from mine, close enough that I could almost taste the tension in the air. My chest tightened, every muscle in me straining with the urge to move, to bridge those last inches. But neither of us moved. We simply breathed each other in, suspended in a moment that stretched like eternity. The silence was deafening. The hum of the lights overhead dimmed to nothing. Even my heartbeat felt too loud, too reckless, as though it might betray me. She exhaled again, slower this time, her breath mingling with mine. Her eyes fluttered shut for the briefest second, and I thought, this is it. But then she stopped, holding herself just shy of surrender. We never kissed. But in that trembling nearness, in that fragile pause, it felt as though we already had. And that almost held more weight than 1,000 touches. The nearness of her lips left me suspended, caught in a silence that felt like the center of a storm. My breath ached in my chest, waiting for something, anything, that might tip the balance. But instead of giving in, she drew back the smallest fraction, her forehead lowering until it rested softly against mine. The touch was delicate, almost reverent. Her skin was warm, and for a moment, everything inside me stilled. My heart slowed, not because the desire had gone, but because her closeness carried something gentler, an intimacy that asked for patience instead of urgency. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet weight of her lean against me anchor the chaos swirling inside. Her whisper came then, soft enough that it might have been mistaken for a breath. "This can't be," the words broke at the edges, heavy with a truth neither of us could escape. Yet before the ache of them could settle in, she added, even softer, "But I don't want it to end here." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a confession. It was something far more fragile, an admission that what lived between us was real, undeniable, and terrifying in its simplicity. Her hand, the same one that had trembled near mine moments ago, finally gave in. She let her fingers brush against mine again, not with hesitation this time, but with quiet certainty. I turned my hand over, slowly, deliberately, and our palms met in the smallest act of defiance. Skin against skin, steady now, unashamed in its stillness. We stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, hands joined lightly, as though the rest of the world had no right to intrude. The rules, the boundaries, the weight of consequences, they all loomed just beyond the door. But here, in this fragile pause, none of it mattered. Her breathing steadied against me, and I felt her chest rise and fall in rhythm with mine. It wasn't passion that filled the moment. It wasn't even longing. It was something deeper, the quiet relief of being seen, of being held close without needing to explain why. When she finally pulled back, it was slow, reluctant, like peeling away from something she wasn't ready to let go of. Her eyes met mine one last time, and the look there was enough, it told me everything words couldn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. What we shared in that room would linger far longer than a kiss ever could. And as I watched her gather her papers with trembling hands, I knew, this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a silence we both would carry, a silence heavy with everything still waiting to be spoken.